is a proud member of the But Why Though podcast community. Hey y'all, and welcome to another episode of So Here's What Happened. I am Nisha, and as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host,
Carolyn, hi.
yes, and we're also joined by a guest. We're very, very excited to have her here, Stephanie Williams.
Hey, how y'all doing?
We're doing very well, but I know we've been wanting to have you on here for a while, but would you mind letting the people, the listeners know who you are and what you do?
What do I do? So I sometimes write about pop culture. So whatever that means to you, for me, it means a lot of comic book stuff, genre shows. Anytime I can talk about aliens, I will. But mainly just comics for me. And I also create comics now. I write them, in fact, which has been still very surreal. To go from podcasting and talking about some of these characters to actually now writing stuff for them officially is just I don't know, like I still just haven't wrapped my mind around it, but I am enjoying it and very thankful and I'm happy to be here to talk to y'all.
Yes, and we are very happy to have you here, as me and Carolyn both literally have living heroes within arm's reach. If y'all have not already gone and supported her work, I can't recommend it enough.
Yes, please do, because the art is incredible. Aaron and Christina just really, I don't know, like they made, like I wrote it, but they just really made it pop with their art, because it couldn't be nearly as good as you all tell me that it is without them. So I just wanted to shout them out real quick because they really broke their foot off in that.
They did. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful project. And like when y'all first announced it, like the Kickstarter and everything, and I was just kind of like, who would have thought living single and Marvel characters, specifically Black Marvel female characters and living single, and put them together?
You know, great things happen when the edible finally hits and you're watching Hulu and reading comics at the same time.
I love it. Because I was going to ask you, how did that come about?
It was definitely from the plant that grows in abundance that, you know, sometimes opens your third eye or makes you very hungry or both. But it definitely came from that.
That's amazing.
The thing is with Living Heroes is it's very relatable for a specific generation, especially I think I still get confused between which generations it is, but you know, like I'm a Gen X. I'm a Gen Xer, and then like, you know, like kids that were born in 1983 and down, I would say probably up until 1998 would relate very much to this thing because like we all grew up watching like specific Black shows, like, you know, you had, of course, Living Single, like all the hairstyles with like Khadijah and Maxine and Regine. And but just like in Black culture, whether you're from the Caribbean like me or from North America, like there's certain touchstones that you incorporated into it, so I think so beautifully and hilariously, like the way even their hairstyles play a part in their characters, because like for Black women, like our hair is so important to us, especially if we're talking about the specific time period of the early 90s and mid 90s, like when Living Single was set, like you had like the bob and the bangs, and like you talk about the bayang and all the, and like the and when car and when braids, synthetic braids really started to catch on in the Black community. Like all of that is in here, and then there's the fashion and the terminology, and it's just and the language and the way we speak, and it's like the thing is with the comics is that how we, you know, how when we're reading things we can hear the voices. When I'm reading this, I hear the voices of the actresses from Living Single in my head. No joke.
Yes.
I hear Maxine. I hear all of them in my head. And I think that's so beautiful, the way how you translate it to comics so well. And it fits perfectly. And could you just tell me a little bit about developing their voices for the characters, like choosing which character would be Maxine, choosing who Storm would be, who, you know, so could you tell us a little bit about that development of the characters?
Yeah, so kind of my favorite thing to do in comics is to find characters and like the ways in which I like relate to them. And the same thing goes with like, just characters on TV. So because I read too doggone much, you start to really get a feel for who these characters are between the panels, right? That's kind of how I think of it. Like, the reason why I can relate so much to a Storm or Monica Rambeau or Misty Knight isn't necessarily because of always what has been written specifically for them in their comic issues. It's what I've related to that the author maybe hasn't said or did not know that that is the takeaway that I would take from it. That I would, take that moment as like Storm being like, no, okay, keep messing around and you're gonna find out, even though they didn't like explicitly write that. So in thinking of it that way, for Storm, Misty Knight, and Monica Rambeau, I just thought like, okay, so what parts of these characters remind me of the women in the show? And it just so happened that it worked out that I could see a lot of Khadijah and Monica Rambeau. I could see the funny part was seeing Sinclair and Misty Knight, because you would think that those two characters are two completely total opposites, but no, they're very similar in the ways that they can be very headstrong and funny, even when other people don't think that they're being funny. And with Maxine and She-Hulk, that felt like a no-brainer because they're both lawyers. But if I were to play it, like, yeah, She-Hulk eating up all the food does make sense. Like, she's burning a lot of calories, whatever, like gamma rays that's coursing through her veins. I'm pretty sure that is burning up calories, and she is always hungry. And then for Storm to be, oh my God, how am I blanking on her name? Jesus Christ, Regine. Storm to be Regine, that seemed like a definite no-brainer because they're both two characters that folks think that, yeah, they date a lot, but that's not completely true. Maybe for Regine it is, but for for Storm, she definitely has that vibe to her. And then fashions, because the reason why I love a lot of older comics is because the fashions are there. The heroes are hardly ever in their suits, and if they are in them, it's for like maybe a few pages, maybe just one issue, but they're in their outside of work clothes a lot. So I don't know, like it just all came together. And then thought I was going to struggle with thinking of like Overton and his roommate, whose name I'm also blanking on because my brain no longer works.
Kyle?
Yes, Kyle. Thank y'all. At first I thought I was going to struggle with that, but I was like, no. Sam Wilson has always been a character that I felt like I would really enjoy if he had more of that himbo energy, kind of like Overton does.
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, that makes sense. And then for Wyatt Wingfoot as Kyle, I was just like, I just kind of want to write Wyatt Wingfoot because it's a character that I've always wanted to see more of. So that's just kind of how that happened. And next thing I know, I just wanted to land a joke with Misty Knight and her being a roommate with, Jean Grey, because it actually happens in the comic. And I just thought like, okay, so like if Jean dies and has died, like what does Misty Knight do about rent? Because they were splitting it. So like, what does that look like? And I was like, okay, well, maybe she'll move into an apartment with Storm, because Storm has roots in Harlem, because like that's originally where her father is from, and then also she has grandparents and aunts that are still there. So it just kind of all came together in a way of one, me reading comics too damn much, and then me doing this binge watch of Living Single, and I was like, okay, this works. So it's supposed to be a one-off. And then I ended up doing a second page, and next thing I know, was doing a Kickstarter, and never in a million years did I think it'd get funded, but definitely never did I think it would get funded in like 24 hours. Like, y'all are nuts.
Yeah, I remember the Kickstarter because that was right around the time because you were, I think was it just before, just after Misty Knight's Untamed Afro? Because
it was after.
It was just after, right? Because I remember distinctly, it was a Sunday. You were on the Birds of Prey podcast, and you mentioned it, and then I saw the tweet. Like I think maybe the week after, somewhere around there, and I was like, submit. because I just thought I was just like, this is an amazing idea. And then we're always talking about representation, but then when we talk about representation, I don't think we think about how these characters could be portrayed differently in different mediums. Like, you know, when we talk about, we always, especially with, if we're going to talk about MC, we want to see a Black character in fiction represented by a Black actor on screen. But then when you did it, I think you took it up another level where you kind of like added layers to these characters that we knew from comics, or like me, who had a cursory knowledge, and I really only started to learn more about Misty Knight, like the Dora Milaje and those kind of things from your podcast. And then you added just more layers to them by integrating Black pop culture into it, which is something I don't think I've ever seen before, because we took it from a very different perspective. Where again, I have to keep mentioning the Hero, because just the Hero alone shows like you knew what you were going for from the very beginning, and you executed it so beautifully, you and the creative team. And I remember, because Nisha and we talked about this on the podcast when we did a review for the comic, and I talked about the Hero too, because I was just like, I love the Hero, just like even the back of the comic. People, if you've ever been to a Black hair salon,
yes,
you know these posters.
it's so good.
I just feel like being a Black person in fandom, you know, I feel like a lot of folks wonder, like, well, then how do y'all like, I don't like find these things relatable, because a lot of times it's like predominantly white or something like that. But it just goes to show like the way that you interpret, the way that we interpret, the way that we relate to things is often through like a through line from our own cultural experiences, and then kind of projecting that onto these characters, even though sometimes they don't exude that. Like Misty Knight having the same hairstyle, like Black superheroines having the same hairstyle, period, all the time, never made sense to me, because we don't keep the same hairstyle all the time. I mean, at one point, I think when I was going to work, I would change my hairstyle like maybe every 3 to 4 weeks or something like that. And that was why I made it a point for in this comic to make sure if no one else changed their hair frequently, Misty Knight did, because I was tired of that bang and that afro in the back and all of that. And I was just like, no, it's time for Miss Mamas to get some freedom and get some different hairstyles.
Thank you. Because I shared this actually with like a lot of people who I know who love comics, and I pointed this out to them, because like I told them like, yeah, I love Misty Knight, but I'm like, and like I would talk to them about comics, and obviously these are non-Black people, so like I would be like, my one problem with Misty Knight in the comics is those like, why is the bang? Like, and that was my like, why is that bang? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why is that bang straight and slicked, but her hair is an afro? Logically, it doesn't make sense. Like, and if I'm a Black woman and I'm fighting crime and I'm sweating up a storm, this isn't like strategically sound.
Like, no, and like that's the whole thing right there. Like, if you want to have a slick down bang with your fro, your puff in the back, that's fine, but you're definitely not wearing that while you're working out, or at least without a headband or something. And she's just out there just your wow, with the bang.
Are just off. You can't see. How do you roundhouse kick, ma'am?
No, and like the practicality just doesn't work out. So it's just those little things. And another thing that I thought was important was to show slice of life without, so like an adult type of thing, or something that's geared towards adult that wasn't like extra gratuitous, extra violent, overly sexual for no reason, because I don't have a problem with no sex and anything. That's fine with me. But when it's just like just excessive and just like, why are we here type of situation. And I thought that was important too, because there's a lot of manga that I read that I enjoy, because it's simply just some people having a day, and then that's it. And I just thought that was important, especially for Black superheroines, because if we're just thinking about Black women in general, you know, being asked to save the day and to put others first and stuff. So what does it look like when they're on their day off? And what does it look like when something happens and they're in for the night? Are they going to handle that? And I said, for this time, no, because there are other superheroes in New York, so let them handle it. Our bonnets aren't on, and we are in for the night.
And I have to say that is something that really drew me to this project. Like when you first announced the Kickstarter, I was just like, also like Carolyn, like, yep, take my money, take all my money. I love it. But like when you find out like it's not just about them like being superheroes, it's about them living their everyday lives. And it's like, yo, I accept this as canon. In my head, this is what they do in their free time. Like I don't care. Marvel has to accept it as canon because like truthfully, you gave us the friendships and like these bonds between the characters that I wished I always saw exist. And I
Yes.
feel like when we talk about like going back to like the whole representation thing, and I get like this kind of leads into my question for you. Do you feel like there is a lack of that where it's like we'll see like I'm sure we've seen like where Storm interacts with another black female character, but not to this level. And I do feel like if it's there, it's there, but it's not like, you know, is it pertaining to the mission that they're fighting, or can Storm just be, Aurora and like
Yes.
exist and like talk about, oh, my hair and like, oh, what I'm doing. But like I just feel like we were lacking this in comics. And did
Yeah,
oh
I
no.
kind of felt that way because I remember like when I really got into like the older Avengers comics or whatever, and like those women and like predominantly white women, like you saw their friendships and you definitely saw the guys. So there were definitely moments in comics where Cap, Beast, and like Wonder Man or whatever are kicking it at the mansion trying to figure out what they're going to do for the night, or trying to figure out how they're going to help Steve out because he's broke. So there was definitely that was existent, but there was far a little in between for Black women. And I'm just like, okay, well, like, why is this not a thing? Because I would think for, a Storm or Misty Knight or Monica Rambeau, like, when there are other Black women in the workplace, I tended to gravitate towards them. I came out of a STEM background. So there were plenty of times where, you know, there would be a new Black woman in the building and she was actually there to like work and wasn't visiting or something like that, where I was just like, oh my God, we got to talk. And I just kind of feel like on these teams where they're predominantly white or whatever, that if there was another Black superhero one that was around, that they would probably have lunch together or something like that. So that was really important because it is really missing. The only time, that's why I kind of make that joke in the comic where, the Black heroes don't get together unless like T'Challa's in town or it's Black History Month or like vampires are around or something like that. It's like always this one formulaic, 2 or 3 formulaic things, but like the Black characters don't get to just kind of be around each other just because out of their own agency. It's always, because hey, it's February, so like let's get these Negroes together, or it's just something like that, or someone dies like Rhodey did in Civil War II.
Right.
Yeah. And they had to like meet up and stuff for that. So I don't know, again, like I just thought it was important to just kind of show these characters just kind of, kicking it and hanging out.
Yeah, and this is actually a kind of like perfect segue for my next question because like we know that MCU now is making the show. So we had WandaVision, I know, and then we just recently had Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So I wanted to ask you about have you seen any improvement in regards to like seeing the Black characters just existing? Because I for one don't think we have, because we had Monica in WandaVision and her entire plot, story, reason for being was about Wanda and supporting Wanda and trying to help Wanda and saving the town and saving, and saving these people. We got one scene where she talked about losing her mom, and it wasn't even a direct reference. Like it was inferred that we guessed that her mother died from cancer, possibly, and then like her dealing with coming back from the snap and all of that, but we didn't get any exposition, any explanation, any dialogue with regards to what her home life is like. I was hoping we did not. And then we saw her basically, as I called it, the mamification of her, where her at the end she saved Wanda's 2 imaginary children, where like they don't exist. Like those 2 bullets could have gone through those kids, like no harm, no foul. And then what Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we got a bit of it where we got to see Sam interacting with Sarah and his nephews. And I thought that was really good. And then we got to see him, trying to apply for a loan. And then with that whole storyline about Black people are so disenfranchised, even one who's a superhero and help save the world and all that. We got a bit more of that. But I then think even then, all of that was still tied up into him being a superhero. We didn't really get much scenes of just him and Sarah existing as family members. You know what I mean? Like all of their dialogue was still connected to his position as Falcon. And then we got a little bit at the end where we saw him being and him and Bucky being friendly with the family. But apart from that, we still don't really know much about these characters.
And it's frustrating. Because I often feel like with WandaVision, because I felt very differently about that show while watching it in real time, because like it was a week-to-week thing. So I'm thinking, well, one, the bar is in hell, right? So that's one thing. And then two, for the positive things that they were doing, because it was a week-to-week thing, I kept thinking like, okay, so like they'll do this or they'll do that and they'll bring this together, and that never happened. And then the finale happened. And then watching it in retrospect, and a binge watch, just like, oof, this was actually not all that great from the beginning. Because like, were there great moments? Absolutely. And that they, I guess I'm always gonna have a problem, unfortunately, with Monica Rambeau and the MCU because of the way that she was introduced in Captain Marvel as this little girl who was always going to be tied to Carol. And it just kind of sucks because these two characters didn't really even cross paths like that, even when they were both Avengers members at a time. But like they didn't really start crossing paths until the later name change when Carol took Captain Marvel, and that wasn't until like the 2010 to the late 2000s. So it's just weird. And I hate that. And now we're gonna get the Marvels or whatever, and it looks like that movie will possibly like be a co-vehicle or a 3 vehicle because Kamala Khan is in it, but it's frustrating. Because out of all of the Marvel Universe characters, Monica Rambeau was probably the strongest next to Storm when it came to having stories where she was on the team, but not just on the team, like actually integral to missions getting completed and actually having a role in what they did. And it's really, she's an interesting case because her history has been, as she's gone, it's been really reductive when it started off so positive. And that's just always been interesting to me because this is a character that was created in the 80s and had better stories in the 80s than she currently does now. There's some here and there, but she isn't always as integral to the story as she was then. And then like with Sam, the thing that frustrated me about that was they made a big deal to say that they were going to tackle race in this show. And I just wish they didn't, because they did a lot of saying that they're saying something without even really saying anything at all. Like the thing is like, it's possible for people to connect, and especially Black people to connect with Black characters without having to connect with them through shared traumas. So going to the bank and getting denied for a loan, like, yeah, sure, we can relate to him in that way, but we could have also related to him through more stuff, doing other things with Sarah and his nephews. Because I don't know, I've been trying to figure out a way to kind of like articulate this, but it just seems like a lot of times for Black superheroes, and I've noticed this in my readings of older and newer stuff, and especially the newer stuff, is this need to like remind everyone that they're Black because this character has been written by a white person for so long. So it's this need to put the extra Black v Black stamp on the character, which sometimes ends up taking away from the character and also just making the story way less more imaginative than it could be. Which is just frustrating because it's just like, yo, the character's Black. You are a Black writer. The thing that you're doing is going to be Black without you yelling in our faces that it is Black. Kind of effortlessly, like just kind of let that be. And like, I know that that's easier said than done, but even just speaking as a person who writes, is really getting into this comic book space and writing for Black characters. I try to I actually don't even have that urge. It's just, you know, I'm just writing it. It's gonna be Black because I'm Black, or it's gonna be queer because I'm queer. So I don't have to put that extra emphasis on it, because it's just gonna flow naturally. And I just kind of feel like, well, with WandaVision and Monica Rambeau, like that authenticity was missing because clearly no Black women in the writers' room. And even for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, even though there were Black men in the writers' room, you know, that still isn't enough. Because so like in the whole representation matters thing, like, sure, if we're writing, we're also on the screen and stuff like that, like things can happen, but that's not always guaranteed. Looking at you, Kenyon Barris, which aren't we getting another brownish or something?
Yeah.
With Eva Longoria, like
That man is a
all of
menace.
this is.
He's a menace.
Just
you know, he has figured out how to print his own money by copying and pasting the whole thing. And one hand, I want to be irritated by it because we have to, you know, endure these shows, but also at the same time, I mean, I guess hats off to him for like figuring it out.
I mean, basically. I mean, like, you know what? It gave us more Tracy Ellis Ross and it gave us Marseille Martin. So at the end of the day,
yeah,
I'm happy about that. No shade to the other ones, but like, truthfully, after Grownish, I was like, this is not for me anymore.
Yeah, I tapped out. I didn't even try.
I couldn't. I tried. I really tried. And oh, you know what? So Hallie and Chloe, because I just love them. But like at the same time, one day we gonna do it. We gonna talk about that man, and we will have to have you back, Steph, because I just can't with him.
You know, between him and Tyler Perry, I find myself watching Tyler Perry stuff, like actually actively like putting on a Tyler Perry thing, because I don't know, like for him, I just kind of feel like he knows that, you know, this thing is what it is and it's not more than what he could make it out to be. And for Kenya is like, oh yeah, I'm doing this groundbreaking thing. It's like, nah, bro, you actually really aren't. But Tyler Perry, I mean, unfortunately, I will watch Why Did I Get Married several times because it is funny to me for all of the wrong and inappropriate and problematic reasons.
And I regularly rewatch Why Did I Get Married 1 and 2 more than one, because like when she's like boom, like just that one scene is worth watching the entire movie.
I mean,
like,
the fact
also just the whole torturing of Janet Jackson throughout number 2 only to introduce The Rock at the end. And it's always kind of funny to me because during that time, like The Rock was popping up in random stuff because this is like before he really turned into like this leading man. Right. And you could tell that it was literally like, you know, hey, let's throw The Rock in here. So we do a 3, then, you know, guarantee seats. But for her to go through all that trauma just for The Rock to introduce himself to her, it's just madness.
If Tyler Perry's going to do one thing, it's going to be write a Black woman to be unhinged, go through trauma. Sorry, many things. Unhinged, go through much emotional trauma, and probably go through much abuse.
Yeah.
And then because she found God and she believed and she prayed hard enough, she went through all the trauma and she was loyal enough, and then he will reward her with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
I mean, it is, even talking about it right now, I'm just like, I probably will be watching this in about 2 weeks because, yeah.
Great for like when you just want to turn on trash stuff. I love how like when I'll talk to my parents and they'll just be like, have you been watching the new Tyler Perry show? I'm like, you know good and damn well I'm not watching The Oval. But you can tell me all the trash that happens on that terrible show. Right. Also that other one, because I'm not going to
sit. The Half and a Half Nights.
Yes, the Half and a Half Nots, because I can't sit through 20 minutes of them being in the same scene, no progression, the same argument for 20 minutes. And I'm just like, who wrote this?
I saw one episode of that show and never again. Like,
don't do it.
It's Tika something that was in that, right? Was it Tika?
Yes.
Yeah, Tika was in that, yeah.
Yeah, and I watched one episode of that and I'm like, Tika, I love you, girl, but no.
You know, she got her bag and she got out. I'm happy for
her.
her.
I gotta respect the women. Like, listen,
I respect her for that. And that's it.
My problem is just like they just deserve better than what he gives them to work with. Like I'm never against the actors and actresses. They doing what they got to do. Is just he's at fault for not giving them better material. And like I mean the thing is I was following his career from like long. I watched the stage productions like when they
Same.
were on TV.
Same.
Like
We all did. We was all there.
at least like it was amazing seeing the progression from like stage to screen, and then like he does like the man had a hustle. Like he like Kenya Barris, they know how to play Hollywood and they playing that game well for keeps. But we deserve better, people. Like black women deserve better than walking around in these hair hats. I can't even call them wigs. They're hair hats. I will never forgive them for what they did with Shamar with that cornrow wig. Never. That was unforgivable.
The technology with braid wigs has come so far though now. Like
it has, but according to The Walking Dead, they said, you know what, we do not care. But I mean, that's another thing with Living Heroes, and why I hope that the goal was, one, selfishly, I just wanted to create something that I've been wanting for a long time, but also I just hope that when other Black women read it, and when I say Black women, I mean all Black women, when they read it, that they just felt some semblance of, okay, yeah, like I get that, or this is something that I've been wanting in my comics for a long time. And so far it sounds like y'all get that, and that makes me really happy, because that was just the end goal with that, because like we should have it. So like, why does this not exist?
I mean, yes, and I would say you definitely accomplished that. That was actually going to be one of my other question to you, is like, what's your goals? But like, look at you ahead of the game, because like, I didn't know how much I needed this project until like you had put the first like picture of it out there. And then like, I thought it was just a one-off. I'm like, this is hilarious. I would take an entire book of this. And then lo and behold, we get a whole book of it. And it's just like, but for real, like Marvel, this is canon now. This is what, like to Carolyn's point, I feel like what in your goal, I feel like this is what a lot of like the content when we talk about representation is missing. Like some people think it's as simple as finding a Black and brown character, throwing them into the show, and then talking about the cops and the police, or talking about immigration, and then talking about like what other social issue is specific to that character's race. When it's just like, no, sometimes I just want to see the characters exist and like have that slice of life. I want to see I would love to see Storm go to a beauty salon and get her hair done.
I want to see them like I can imagine a conversation with like talking about the water and getting her hair wet and be like, but while I'm gonna start a thunderstorm in like 2 minutes, so you got to find a way to fix it, right? Like, all that kind of situation, and there was something I wanted to ask you. I mean, like we kind of like talking about the MCU a bit, but I think we do have to talk about it quite a bit, because it is the biggest pop culture franchise in existence right now, and so much of our entertainment is focused not only on the MCU but what Disney is doing and how all of these things are branching out into other projects. Like for you've taken this, and you like, as Nisha said, you're ahead of the game. Like you're literally ready for Marvel now. But then one of my we like Nisha and I, we talked about this in our most recent podcast episode, and I talked about the specific scene where Sam came out of the house and the little boy was like, "Hey, Black Falcon," and he got all offended. And I'm like, "Sir, why are you getting all offended? This is a Black child giving you the moniker of Black Falcon," because as I said, he saw the word Black as a means of respect, because he respected Black Panther. And like in a child's mind, they're thinking, you're Black, you're a Falcon, he's Black, he's a Panther, Black Falcon, right? And so I'm like, that scene bugged me to no end, and it still does, clearly, because I'm like, why are you, a Black man, getting all offended at this little boy calling Black Falcon? And if you do want him to call you Falcon, all you have to do is say, "I'm Falcon." That's all you like. That's the only thing. But he got all offended. I'm like, really?
Yeah, and it's funny though, because the way that Sam Wilson has been written in the MCU is the same energy as the Sam Wilson in the comics almost, and that's a choice, it is a hell of a choice. I'm just so thankful for T'Challa. When T'Challa was introduced to the MCU and the way that Ryan Coogler wrote him, it was different from the T'Challa in the comics. I can't stand that T'Challa at all.
Yeah.
And I was kind of hoping that Sam Wilson would kind of get that reimagining just a little bit, where he isn't just Steve Rogers' sidekick. He isn't just this very two-dimensional Black character, but he's one with a little bit more depth. But we didn't even get that, because by the end of that series, and Sam takes the shield or back or whatever and pronounces himself Captain America, I'm just like, okay, so did you never think that you weren't unworthy? Because that was never a thing. It seems like you always thought that you were worthy, because like, where did that progression happen? So you're basically telling me that, oh, you always thought you were worthy of this thing, but you just didn't take it. So I thought that was weird. Like, I still don't know who Sam Wilson is, other than someone who is still irritating.
But I said the same thing. We know more about Zemo. We know more about Bucky. We even know more about John Walker than we do.
Even I am.
Yeah, even I am.
Even I am to witness it, because even in that small that cold opening or whatever, where you see her repeating the words that would trigger Bucky, and he's emotional, and then also, but she has this face of confidence that either way she's got him. If he wows out, she'll fix, she'll handle it, but she fully believes that he has completed the training and everything they've gone through. Like, we see a tender Io, which I love. Like, just the way that the Dora Milaje have evolved in comics and then to the MCU has been some of the most mind-blowing thing, because the way that they started out into where they are now is just night and day. So the fact that we didn't get that with Sam Wilson bugs me to no end, because like, it's possible. So like, why didn't y'all do that? And there's reasons, because of like how people think of superheroes in general is very interesting to me, because we're getting more and more of that because of the MCU, like Carolyn mentioned, like being the source of a lot of content or whatever, and just kind of seeing how people view superheroes as very black and white, or considering them cops. Are all superheroes cops? No. Are some of them? Absolutely. But I don't know, like the way that I think of superheroes are these characters that allow us to play in these moral playgrounds in a very elevated way. So WandaVision, for all its faults, I did still enjoy, because of, we get a Wanda who is terrible, quite frankly. But it's very true that sometimes hurt people will hurt people, right? That's just something that is very real. And I'm okay with them kind of exploring that messiness in what it means to be human and stuff like that. I didn't appreciate the way that they want Monica to just pretty much tell her, like, it's okay, girl, they'll forgive you because of what you had to sacrifice. Because no. But outside of that, like, I appreciated, like, superheroes aren't invaluable. Nobody is. So in that regard, I just again, this makes me wonder, like, so Sam, did you think you were always worthy of the shield, or did you just give it up because of the complicated relationship between Black community in America? And I don't know the answer to that, because the show never answered it. I don't even know if the show even asked it, to be quite honest.
It never did, because the way how I see it is, at the end of the day, he's basically going to be, I could be wrong, but I'm reading it as he's going to be, Nisha used the term respectability politics, and that's right. Like, he's gonna be like, like the Black man who's gonna be like, yeah, sure, white people do ish, but it's okay. I'm giving you the Black pass because I'm Black Captain America, so therefore I'm the representative for all Black people, and he's gonna excuse a lot of ish, because even at the end, he accepted an apology from these politicians on behalf of the Flag Smashers when he wasn't even as disenfranchised the way that they were. Like, sir, that's not your place. And that bugged me, because it kind of, like, when you're, especially if you're talking about the storyline that you're talking about, where you have like a fascist who's John Walker, and he's basically getting to walk away scot-free no accountability, no punishment, no acknowledgement of the harm that he did, the murder that he committed. And then you're gonna have this black man say, I'm gonna be representative of all of this entire corrupt system, this imperialistic system, as I called it. That's a problem. And we don't know what plans they have, if they're gonna do a second season of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We don't know what the next MCU film is gonna be beyond Black Widow, which was filmed like what 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
But like I am actually not looking forward to see how black characters will be developed, if at all, in the MCU. And that is a problem for me as someone who does like the MCU, because I have problems with how people of color in general are handled in the franchise, because like everyone knows how much I hate that Hiroyuki Sanada's character and a whole bunch of Japanese men were killed off because Cliff decided he wanted to take out his man pain on all of these Japanese people and Mexicans in Mexico, instead of sitting down and going having a therapy session. And I'm like, if that's how they're going to end off the last MCU film, and this is what they're doing with the black characters and other people of color characters in the shows, I kind of shudder to think of what they'll do in the films. Like we have Shang-Chi, but Shang-Chi is being handled, I'm hoping it's gonna be like Black Panther, where we had like proper respect paid to Black culture because we had a Black director. I'm hoping the same thing happens with Shang-Chi. And I will not speak about Simu Liu and my problems with him. That's another discussion for another day. But I'm hoping, I kind of shudder to think about what will happen for the rest of the show. And I don't know, could you? I think because you know so much about the comics, I wanted to ask you. We know the next show is going to be Loki, and I know Naomi Harris and help me.
Yes.
Wumi Masaki is going to be in it. Do you have any idea what their characters going to be? Could you tell us a little bit? If do you have any? I mean, like from the comics, anyway.
Yeah. So Google's character is really important, and should have a pretty.
No, I said Naomi Harris, right? It's Google.
Yeah.
Google Ambassador.
Google, yeah. But like her character should have hopefully a lot to do, because in the comics she does. I think she turns into Lady Loki, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. So we have that. If that happens, who knows? As far as the other character, I don't recall her in the comics, or if there's like an iteration. I think this might be. Not saying this character doesn't exist in the comics, but I think it's one of those things like we're playing it up, kind of like a Jimmy Woo situation or whatever. So I'm hoping that Loki is more closely related to WandaVision, which I think it will. And by that I mean in the weirdness, kind of getting out of the way that Falcon and the Winter Soldier just felt like a bloated movie. So fingers crossed, I guess, with that one. Because even with just back real quick to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the way that ended for Isaiah Bradley, that was trash, because he was rightfully angry, and Sam is just not telling him to put his anger away, but essentially, hey, you've got this, people will now know what you did, but not really, because you aren't actually living under that name anymore. But like they'll know what you did, so like all is forgiven. And I know that's not what he's saying verbatim or anything, but essentially that's what that is. And then you have Sarah end up getting, an apology to her family and all of that for the way the government treated her during that time when she was exiled. And I don't know, like, this is where I don't want to give the show's writers too much credit, because I don't know if that was really actually done on purpose. That juxtaposition or whatever. Maybe, but I don't see it. But just looking at it that way, that sucks, right? To have this Black man who has been rightfully angry at the country and the government, kind of pacified and kind of told, in a way, through this action, to kind of put his anger away, because things have been righted a little bit. Like I don't like that. Like, if you're going to show dirty laundry, then like show it, let them lay around in it and stuff like that. Don't like show it and then immediately put it in the washing machine. So I don't know. Like, I just don't want any more Black characters to pop up in the MCU until they have Black writers and directors and stuff that are genuinely going to care for, I don't know, like showcasing these characters in a way that is just not leaving them restricted to the same things that we are in real life. Because I don't know, like, it's just always weird to me in like fantasy and sci-fi and stuff when the same kinds of limitations that we have to deal with are then put upon these characters in a way that doesn't really add up, because why would that be the way for them when they can do this other thing and not have to deal with it?
Right.
They can do something that we are unable to do as far as reacting. So that's just always weird to me.
Yeah. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly with that, because like, and that's kind of like the Isaiah Bradley thing kind of like clenched it for me, cinched it for me, whatever. Because like, yeah, no, Sam has always kind of like, I don't know, there's always been something about him that just bothered me a little bit. And it was like, and then I was like, it's definitely respectability politics, because he just gives me respectability politics.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I did this and I did that, and if I give this respect, then I'll get respect back. And I'm like, that's great, but that's not how the world operates, Sam. And it's like you seem to still not understand that, and it's disturbing that Sam doesn't understand why Isaiah, a Black man who fought in Vietnam, who was then wrongfully persecuted, has an issue with having his story out there, and then tries to be like, look what I did. I made sure your story was told. I'm like, yeah, it's great that he got credit, and it looks like you maybe got him expunged or his record, I would hope, because if not, you put him on blast. But either way, like how you said it, like it's pacifying the issue, because the fact of the matter is, even though you're giving his story out there to the people, all that trauma and pain that happened to Isaiah still exists. And
with
like,
no type of restitution, no reparations, no anything.
None whatsoever. So like, what is he supposed to really do with that? And it's kind of like, it's like,
also,
great.
It's a museum, and museums aren't always accessible. So if people happen to visit that museum and walk to the very end of that exhibit, then they'll see that. But that's just another thing that was just kind of, I don't know, like very I guess the way politicians treat things these days, right? Like a quick fix or a quick whatever, or like that unveiling of what they're calling an African statue in New York or whatever. And it's just kind of like, these type of things don't actually correct anything.
Because like, it doesn't. And I say that, like, had a grandfather that fought in World War II, had a grandfather that fought in Vietnam, had a grandfather who was affected by Vietnam, like, drastically, and he died before I was born. And it's just like, them acknowledging him as a hero, as somebody who fought for this country, means absolutely nothing, because I know what the damage that did to men like my grandfather and many other men who fought in these wars. So it's just like, that's why I just like, that bugged me so much. So like, going back to like, you know, to the point, it's just like, it just seems like they're like going back to, because I wanted to kind of lead this into the Riri Williams kind of thing also, because you're right. I feel like this is a common thing we've seen when it comes to like Black superheroes. Like Riri Williams, I believe there's like, she has a family member who dies from like a gunshot.
2
in Chicago. 2. That's right. 2 of
so
them.
The father, his stepfather, and her best friend.
Right. And it's like, the frustrating thing is like, going back to what you said of just like, it would be great for her to become a hero without having to live through that trauma that I'm sure many people have already lived with. Or like, you don't have to like bring gun violence into it in order for like a Black character, like I think you had said it before, to make sure like put the stamp of Blackness on them.
And then the problem with that is because it came from a white man, Brian Michael Bendis, on top of that. So maybe it would have been a little annoyed if a Black writer had did that, but I would understand, right, a little bit more, because that's a little bit more intimate to them. But I don't know, it just looks very different when you have someone who is not of the culture choosing that for the character, because it's kind of like, but why? Like, why did you go this route? And just bringing it real back real quick to Monica Rambeau, this is why for her character, I was still so peeved with the way that she was introduced, because she is a character who becomes a superhero because she just wants to. It's not because of, you know, great tragedy or any of that. It's just she has this great power and she feels that it is up to her, like it's her duty to go ahead and do something with it, something similar to like Peter Parker or whatever. So I don't know, y'all. Like, I just, for worlds that exist where people are flying around in tights and can like lift buildings over their head, it's just always interesting to me sometimes how limited the imagination can be when it comes to how these characters function and who they are and why they make the decisions that they make and the stuff that they have to deal with. And like that's stuff that I'm exploring right now as I write this series that I cannot talk about just yet, but that's something that I'm dealing with as I write that. Because like, what does being a hero mean for this particular character, and how is it different from, you know, a white predecessor or something like that? For the Wonder Woman story that I wrote, the anthology story that I wrote for Wonder Woman #2, I think it's Wonder Woman Black and Gold. I have Wonder Woman and Nubia doing something really fun, because why not? You know, literally, why not? You know, there were different stories that I thought of pitching that were a little bit more close to real world stuff, but I was like, no, I can still make social commentary about having them do this really fun thing. And folks will still probably find it relatable because they'll see those little nuggets dropped into there, like what it means for a Black woman to be in a predominantly white space and to have to deal with other white women, and what it looks like when another white woman actually, you know, does something to be an ally and steps up and says something, and just different stuff like that. Like, those are all still relatable things. Someone does not have to get shot by the police or you know, some other horrific trauma for you or Carolyn or anyone else to be able to just kind of relate to that character and find bits and pieces of yourself in them.
Yeah. And going from that, like for the new CW show, which is Batwoman, her backstory is a traumatic, tragic backstory where like a family member, I think it's her dad was in prison, someone else was shot and died, and she herself was a victim of violence. And I'm like, it's just like she got the she got the trifecta of tragic backstories. I even told my friend, this is like watching a Korean drama where all the leads gotta have some kind of traumatic backstory. But it's even worse because it's like you're stigmatizing and stereotyping a Black woman, where you're saying if she's Black, she wants to be a hero, she must have had this horrendously horrible thing happen to her. No.
Did Tyler Perry write this?
No, well, I was
It was a white
I
woman.
can't even believe I'm about to say this, but in the defense of Black woman, not Black woman, but Batwoman, because I didn't want to watch that show for all of the reasons that you mentioned. And then I watched and I got to episode, I think 3, and it was Batgirl Magic. And I saw the name of that title and I was like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? And then I watched the episode, and the way that the writers approached that was, this is why saying this cutesy thing in pop culture, or I mean like taking something that, you know, Black women say to one another and stuff like that, and like having someone white use it and apply it, why it just doesn't work. And in the episode, they kind of touch on why that doesn't work is because, yeah, sure, you can refer to this woman as Batgirl Magic, but she is still having to deal with being, you know, profiled by the police, still having to deal with a parole officer that is willing to like throw her back in jail because she's 10 seconds late for a meeting. You still have that going on, and it kind of works. Because I think Batwoman is just an interesting example, period, because this character does have so many traumatic things for her background, but the way that the writers have used it as the season has progressed, it's not in a way that hinders the character. It just adds to I don't know, like the way that she does certain things, the way that she's affected, and why her being Batwoman is so different from Kate. I'm also still trying to figure out how to articulate this, because it's still different from Riri in a way. And this goes back to like, we can still have these characters that have these backgrounds where, you know, unfortunately a family member dies or something like that happens, but like, what are you making that the character's identity? Like, is everything the character does and deals with like steeped in that? I think that's why Doom Patrol season 2 I love so much, because they moved Cyborg out of, am I human? Am I not human? I hate my father. No, I don't hate my father. And they move him out of that, and they introduce a Black love interest to him, Ronnie Evers, and it takes that character beyond that type of thinking. So it's just like we're in like such a weird spot right now. Like, we have so much. We're getting a lot more Black characters in superhero genre, but some stuff is still not firing on all cylinders. So I think Batwoman just did something recently where all the Black characters got arrested by the police, and I was like, "What are we doing here?" I was like, "Wait, what are we doing here?" And then I watched it, and I think I remember the same person who wrote episode 9, which I really love, wrote that one too, and I was like, "Okay, I see what you're doing here. I get it and appreciate it, but also I'm just tired." Because sometimes you're just tired of seeing stuff. It could be good, but you're just also kind of seeing the same motif over and over again. So I think we're also dealing with that type of fatigue. Because Barry Jenkins' Underground Railroad, I heard that it's, you know, it's good. It's heavy as hell, but it's really beautiful to watch. But I won't be watching it just because I just don't feel like putting myself through that right now.
Yeah.
No, I feel it, because I've seen Underground Railroad. I screened it. And we're gonna do an interview with some of the cast for Africa. But when my sister and I first started watching it, I couldn't finish the first episode because there's a very difficult scene to watch, and I had to stop. And I kind of like, it took me like a day to go back to it, and then I watched episode 2 and 3, and it's not graphic or anything, but it's just like the heaviness of it.
Yes.
And then and what I think a lot of people don't understand, like particularly for me, like growing up in the Caribbean, growing up in Barbados, we can't separate where we live from plantations. Like literally, like when we're walking to school, we walk past plantations, walk past cane fields, and like you at the back of your head is almost, is this a real thing in the Caribbean where we know what happened at these plantations, we know what happened here, and we just kind of have to like push it far back because like it's a part of our history. But then when I'm watching these kind of things on scene, like I've been in a plantation house, I've attended functions at these plantation houses, and is this a real experience where you're like, I'm sitting having dinner, a fundraising dinner in a plantation house where I know but the kind of shit that went on here. But then when I watch these kind of projects, it does remind me and it does bring it back. Yeah, I saw this. And Underground Railroad, I think, like, I remember when I tweeted out, I said Barry Jenkins, I think compared to a lot of other directors who've done these kind of films and projects, is he's able to show you the beauty of Black people, and he doesn't focus on the pain. Like, there's difficult scenes with like beatings or whatever, but he doesn't make that the objective of the shot. He doesn't make the pain the objective of the shot. You know what I mean? It's the humanity. Yeah. And I understand where as you said, like, it took me a while to like finish, and I do want to write about it because I have a lot of thoughts about it, but it's about how, I think it, like, for a lot of these projects, it's about how the directors and the writers and the actors and everyone approaches the projects. And when they're not done right, that's when we are tired, when we're fed up, and we're just like, give us something different. But when they are done right, that's when we're like, I see the story I see the story you're telling, because these are stories that need to be told. But yeah, there are times when we're tired, and there are times when you're like, for CW, all their shows are going to be doing a Black Lives Matter episode. So it's not just going to be Black women. It's going to be Flash. It's going to be, and just like, and the way they do it is like, the way they want to talk about Black Lives Matter has to do with somebody being arrested. That is not only Black Lives Matter. Could you talk about like work, like, like office politics, like those Black Lives Matter happen in small moments too. We face oppression and racism and bigotry in small moments. So it's not just being arrested. It's not just being stopped by a police officer. It's a little microaggressions that builds up too, right?
Yeah, and like that's the stuff that I wish we would get a little bit more of, because it's not this thing of like, you know, the whole I forgot what it's called, but like, you know, Nazis in media or whatever, like seeing like these characters thrown in, and like it's not literal Nazis making your life hell, my life hell, Nisha's life hell. Like it's not, that's not what's happening. What's happening is like your neighbor next door or something, or that person in Slack or whatever, who's like just a regular everyday white person who is not a Nazi doing these things. And that's stuff that we could see in these shows and stuff like that. Like that's another form of racism that we have to deal with, the different forms of oppression that have absolutely nothing to do with being arrested, gunned down, or something like that. And I don't know, like I just like I will be happy when we can get out of this, you know, having to show that all the time. Like just like I know that it needs to exist, but it's just exhausting, especially when it's happening every day. Like you could just see it happening every day because of people filming it and stuff like that. It's just like we don't really actually need the fictional representation of it, because we're getting enough of it in real life.
Yes.
This is just oversaturation.
Yeah.
And again, it's not saying that you can't do that project that has that thing, because to Carolyn's point, like Barry Jenkins' Underground Railroad does something for this particular story that others don't actually get. And eventually I will watch it, but like I just don't feel like it.
No,
it's just like,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
that's absolutely fine. Because I've had to start telling people that, like, it's like after this last year, like it takes me, like sometimes, like I recognize it in myself for a while now in the last few years, especially with like reviewing film, and people will like give me like screeners and they'll ask me like, oh, do you want to review this? And I'll like watch the trailer and I'll like decide like, is this going to be a heavy thing? Like, is this going to be like heavy on my soul and then heavier for me to write my thoughts out about it? Not because it's challenging to like critique this, challenging because mentally it's going to exhaust me emotionally. And then it's like, then I'm like, no, I will go review an anime that does not do this to me, and or a manga. No, thank you. But it's like, and I don't feel bad about it. It's like, I used to feel like, no, these stories need to be told, and this, like, yeah, and they can be told. They have every right to be told if people want to tell these stories. It's like, I watched Judas and the Black Messiah and I loved it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very, very powerful movie. But you know what I watched after that? I went and watched Craig of the Creek. I just binged all of Craig of the Creek because that's my comfort cartoon, and that's what I needed because I was just emotionally spent. But I really wanted to see that movie. But I'm like, and it's like other things where it's just like nowadays, I'm just like, I'm not watching any slave narrative film unless I truly feel like it's necessary for me to, and it has to check so many boxes. Like, is there a white savior? No. Okay. But like that, and like it's stuff like that where I'm like, I can't do it, and we shouldn't be made to feel bad about it. But it's like, I don't know what's going on in Hollywood right now where they don't understand. It's like, yeah, we're worn out by slave narrative, but we're also worn out by y'all trying to have a nuance of Black Lives Matter by giving us one episode in February.
Yeah.
And then trying to show how, like, see, we hear you, we understand. And it's just like, you don't, because if you did, Iris would have more Black friends on that show. I haven't watched Flash in forever, but I started to be like, Iris has no Black friends, and this makes me suspect.
It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah,
it just doesn't.
It doesn't.
So like the thing, I'm gonna, I swear to God, like this is connected. So like for Underground, like the thing with Underground Railroad that I don't like, I didn't know going into, because I never read the book, is that it's actually not only about like the lead characters, her experience as a slave. It actually ties into her relationship with her mother. And I think the way that was executed so beautifully, because it kind of goes to our point where we were saying Black experiences aren't only about the trauma of slavery or police oppression and that kind of stuff. Like it's actually about her feeling abandoned by her mother, and it's about this relationship between a mother and daughter. But I think it's told so beautifully because it's showing how one thing can change how we view something else. And like Nisha's talking like she talked about like watching Craig Creek. But the thing I think beauty is like I like one of the reasons I love watching like Asian dramas or Korean dramas so much is because a lot of these shows have like extremely deep storylines. Like they talk about depression, they talk about loss, they talk about family relationships, and love. And they even talk about things with like oppression, that kind of stuff. But because they're not told from a particularly Black perspective, and it's not rooted in like things like abject, like blatant racism stuff, that I'm able to still connect to these storylines and not feel the weight of of Black history and oppression behind it. And I think that's like, and like for you, Stephanie, one of the things I really love about following you on Twitter is like you use like comics and cartoons, as particularly you love to use Professor X and how he basically and like how his actions and his words to like the X-Men and like his students, and you kind of tie that into these same narratives of like if you're talking about depression, you can find a clip that relates to that. You tie into like Black music, and you will find like the perfect song from 1992 1993
Yep.
and tie it into that. But like it seems it's comical, but you tie it in so beautifully if you're going to talk about depression, if you're talking about abuse, or like even like with Storm, you talk about colorism. And like you'll have a clip and you'll be like, and Storm will be shading the hell out of Professor S, and we're laughing, but like like Black women, we'll be like, yeah, she's shading him. Like that's not a compliment. She's making a political statement, or she's making social commentary, and you do it so, and I think you do it so well. And I just want to ask you about just using memes in particular in these videos to like say what you have to say, but in a way that I think that a lot of people relate to, and that a lot of people I think grabs people's attention and makes them kind of like even think back like 2 3 weeks. Because I'll think of something, then I'll be giggling to myself like an idiot, and no one knows what I'm giggling about, but I'm like, he Stephanie made that tweet. And so I'll be like, just like talk a bit about just using like cartoons and comics to like get people to listen to the messages that you have to tell them.
Because because of the way that we view comics and we view cartoons as like this children's thing, it's a really great Trojan horse to use this to actually say something, because people aren't really expecting it, because just thinking like, oh, it's just going to be this funny thing, but yeah, it's also a funny thing, but I'm also like trying to say something at the same time. And I don't know, like being able to use memes or like a clip from a show or something like that is just a really great way for me to like kind of say the thing that I need to say without you really sometimes realizing that that's what I was actually going for until after the fact. That's just something about comedians that I've just always enjoyed growing up, that through the laughs and just kind of laughing through the pain, like there are deep messages and commentary being made. Like Cat Williams, as problematic as he is, had a stand-up that I watched on repeat. I can't think of the name of it. I think it came out in maybe 2010, 2011 or something like that. But it was just really good because Cat Williams is brilliant in that way, and saying something funny, but also at the same time, like saying some real shit about just politics, the police, or capitalism, or whatever. And that's just something for like the best comedians who don't rely on low-hanging fruit like being homophobic or transphobic and things like that, and actually have something to say. It's just something that I've always admired, and have somehow figured out to synthesize in my own way, be it through comics or cartoons. I don't know, like I just feel like it's easier to get people to be more receptive to what you're trying to say. Because I've done this before. Like I've said something on Twitter, like without without a photo or a video, and the point was missed. And then I reuse the same thing in a video or a comic or whatever. And then the point is made. And I'm like, aha. I got your attention now because of the silly thing, but now you're listening. So I don't know, like I've always been a fan of like you can catch more. I don't know why you want to catch flies, but catch more flies with
No, that scene don't make no sense.
With
It still
vinegar.
don't make no
I'm
sense.
like that. I'm like, why are you catching flies? But whatever. But anyway, yeah.
Who knows? But oh my gosh, I feel like we could talk to you forever, and I don't want to hold you too long. Carolyn, do you have any other questions, or we can like We can cut this part out. I looked at the clock and I was like, y'all are an hour ahead of me. So I don't want to hold y'all.
Oh yeah, I just
Yeah. Yes, my last question is kind of tied into that because like we talked about using the memes and stuff, but I want to get like super like black and nerdy and 90s right now. The music, like your music choices, like the way how I just want to ask you just how you come up with these clips and these particular songs. Like you would use songs by what's it Yaki, Janet Jackson. Like that one is still one of the funniest ones.
Mary J. Blige.
Mary J. Blige, just like
there's been plenty of times I have choked on my coffee in the morning because of you. Too many times, but it's fine.
A woman's word. A woman was. That's the title of the song.
Oh, for Batman.
Yes.
Yeah, which was still funny though because the fact that I don't know where that came from. It just randomly came because I just thought it was funny. Like I just simply thought that it was absurd and it was funny. Like I've always wanted to have my own animated show, and I've said I would do goofy stuff like that just was outlandish, made no sense. But if you think about it too much, it actually does make sense type of situation. Mm-hmm. But the way that I'm able to kind of find these clips that match up perfectly is because like, this is how, like when I'm reading comics or I'm watching stuff, like this is what Stephanie is thinking about. Like I'm thinking about all these other random things while I'm watching this thing that's unrelated or whatever. Like thinking about Ayanla coming in to like have a group therapy session or whatever with some superheroes because they need it. Like just random goofy stuff like that. I don't know, like it just comes naturally because that is just unfortunately how I've always related to stuff. I'm talking about going all the way back to like Barney when I was like 4 or something like that, like thinking of being at church and like the call and response for like different songs and the way that Barney kind of incorporates that with the kids or whatever. It's goofy and it makes no sense, but at the same time, you think about it for a little bit, it does. So, I just want Black women to lean and be more comfortable with just kind of being goofy. Like everybody else gets to do it. Right. Amy Schumer made a whole career, and a lot of white female comedians have made a whole career of just being gross, which is okay.
Lena Dunham had a whole successful
right
career. And she wasn't even funny.
No, on these types of things. And I just love it when, we're able to just kind of be goofy. Like, I think about it this way. Who is going to want to listen to me if I'm only talking about comics in a way that you could have looked up on Wikipedia? Mm-hmm. I don't even want to listen to that. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was just like, okay, I'm just going to talk about comics in a way that I relate to them. And hopefully people don't think I need to be committed. But like I'm just going to share like what is going through my mind when I am reading these things. Because I don't know, like comics or just cartoons, comics and stuff like that. I just don't see them as a children's only thing. Like these are universal, tools to be used to like send home like really deep messages. Like my son watches My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, which is a really great show. There's no girl boss energy in it. Like it's a legitimately good show. Mm-hmm. And some of the other older cartoons that he's rewatching, he's like, this is actually really well written and good. And actually, I don't even know if this was for kids, because I know for damn sure Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and basically all the DC animated stuff is not really for kids.
No, because McCarthyism went wide over my 10-year-old head. I was like, right. You talking about McCarthyism? What?
Right.
Oh my God. But no, and I get going to like I guess like adding to the memes and stuff like, and like just your mind, just chef's kiss, because I love it. I love it though, because the way you just crack us up with your tweets and your comics, like, but what if though is like, I like your other web comic, and I just like have to say Batman Days. Like
Gotham should have them.
They should. And now I'm just like, This is genius. It just, y'all have, if y'all need to know what I'm talking about, go to Webtoons, look up Stephanie's name, and follow her other webcomic, because it's just, I love that entire web series because it's just more of what Living Heroes is to me. And it, like, you give us the Monica Rambeau, like, slice of life moment that we all kind of really, that we, not kind of, that we all want to see after seeing WandaVision, with her just kicking it with Jimmy and, excuse me, I'm forgetting the other one's name. Darcy. And then just having movie night, because I would take a whole show of just the three of them. And it's just like, it's just, you give us this stuff there, and I'm just like, yo, mine. And it's hilarious, and it's just great. And just y'all just throw your money at stuff, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would love to see you do a Dora Milaje series. Like, I can just imagine the discussion.
Fingers crossed. I'm hoping that this thing that I'm working on, that I'll tell you all about after the recording, might lead to that. But I'm trying my best to make some headway. Because I know, like folks say, like, you know, make your own and stuff, and I will still do that. But also, I don't at all mind playing any sandboxes of like already established IPs, because like these characters are there, so like let me write for them. Let me make some stuff up for you.
Yeah, and it's necessary, like as you're saying, like it's necessary, I think, to write for these already established characters, because you can interject new life and new context into these stories and into these characters, because a lot of these storylines we know are written by white men, or if they're written by black people, they're usually written by black men. And like this, their perspective is going to be completely different to other people of color's perspective and black women's perspective. And when you have a lot of situations being handled and dealt with, I would have loved to see, for instance, if Sarah was there when Sam came on, as like if I would have loved to see a conversation between Sarah and Isaiah. That would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like we need writers like you to give new life to these stories, because some of these stories are like super old and overdone, and just like give us new perspectives. We're going into the future, like bring the stories to the future, right?
Yeah.
And which is what Ryan Coogler did with Black Panther. Is like, we say it's Afrofuturism, but he legit moved those stories forward. He didn't do anything that was the past. Like he's like, everything that's happening is going to propel to the future. Nothing that related to anything, any past storylines or anything, which I think was brilliant. And I think we're doing the same thing, because you're like, we got to look at the stories, have plant them now, and build them in a way that they can give future storylines going forward.
Exactly. No, exactly that.
Yeah, because it's just like, we tired. Like, give us some light comedy, people.
Give me a multifaceted character, please, that looks like me.
Right.
That's not too much to ask.
Because we saw what happened what Taika Waititi did with Thor. He brought he gave Thor a future, a present, and then lo and behold, and then they took him right back to where he was at the beginning. I'm like, oh, you're gonna kill this mass progression. Thor had a wonderful story arc that was happening, and he showed people. Like, I remember a lot of people were like, when I was in the cinema, a lot of people were like, I didn't know Thor was that smart. If the man is thousands of years old in the society years ahead of America, why would he be an
He's a god. He would have god level intelligence at least.
Right?
At the very
and then like Taika Waititi showed people that, and a lot of people didn't know that about Thor, and then they just like smashed all of that progression and just like, and like, no, people, why you do Thor like that? Why?
Yeah, I mean, I do love a himbo, but they teetered too much on that himbo line for him.
They did, and I was like, okay, y'all, this is what we're doing.
We'll see what happens next.
So as we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to say, not only about your work that you've done before, but also for work that you have going into the future? Because I know like you can't say what they are, but I know you're doing some amazing projects, and I was so happy that you got to work with both Marvel and DC, and I think that's actually pretty bloody good and bloody great, because like I think it shows people like your versatility as a creator, and like your mind is, I don't care nobody say you're a genius to me. Like you're the way you're able to connect things, I think is like genius level, and I'm so happy for you and where you're going, and I only want all the best things for you and for your son. And I think your son is a little genius too, because I mean, like you tweet stuff.
Commander in Chief. Just
He is running me through the ringer right now. A whole journey. Some more Parenthood Activate will definitely be on the way because it is a journey. But yeah, because like I have him in mind when I'm creating stuff because I'm hoping that whatever I'm writing, that some 10-11-year-old will read it and say, oh, like I like this person wrote this, like, oh, so like I can possibly do this. I don't know, something about that is just, I don't know, like I just really love that. Not because I'm writing it, but I'm just saying like that's the thought that someone could be reading this and thinking, okay, well, this was done, so like I definitely can't do it. Like it's proof of concept. Like I can do a thing that is just fun and goofy, and people will support it. It doesn't have to be this one kind of way. Like I can be a different type of creator.
Okay. So thank you so much for talking with us, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amazing. And I just
of course
we are gonna have you back again, maybe
please.
Open door policy. You're back.
Open door policy. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna prop this up to you right now. At the end of Loki, we gotta have a discussion about Loki because
that
you got
works.
that women in that show. Like we gotta talk about it. And listen, I have a thing about Loki and when he flips those nice. I just think that's super hot. But that's just me going on a tangent. Anywho, sorry.
No, count me in. I'm down.
Awesome. Well, if you don't mind, you want to tell the people where you want to be found and where they can find your work?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Steph_I_Will. I will say though that I'm on a Twitter hiatus as /strike. So I'll probably be back next month, but if you want to, you can follow me there. And then whysteph.com, you can go there to find some of my latest things, stuff that I've written, things that I have coming in the future. And then what day is it? July 27th. There is Wonder Woman Black and Gold #2. I have a story in that you'll be able to check out. And then I have one thing that should be announced next month. I hope, fingers crossed. So please be on the lookout for that because it's big. And I don't mean that lightly at all.
Awesome. And as always, y'all can find the show at SHWH_pod. You can find me at Neysha Plays on Instagram and Twitter doing cosplay things. I swear, I'm getting back into it. I got braids now. You're going to get anime characters with braids. I don't care if it's not canon. You're getting them. But yes, cosplay's coming for the summer. And then Carolyn.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at CarrieCNH12. That's CarrieCNH12. You can find my writing and Neysha's writing on butwhythopodcast.com, as well as the links that you will find in the description box down below. You can find this episode on our podcast for on butwhythopodcast.com, as well as other podcast streaming platforms. And my YouTube channel under my name, Carolyn Hines. You can find this. I will be linking this there as well, but also other interviews I've been doing with the African American Film Critics Association. We've spoken to Uzo Adobo for her show In Treatment, and other projects. We will be having, as I said, the cast for Underground Railroad. We've done Godfather in Harlem. We'll be doing one with Black veterinarians, which I think would be really fun because that is for National Geographic. And you can find my my Asian dramas chat for Beyond the Romance here on YouTube, as well as follow the hashtag dramas with Carrie, as well as Saturday Night Sci-Fi. I am done. I do so much stuff. I don't even know how. But this has been great. This has been fun. Everyone, please stay safe and join us for another episode of So Here's What Happened for the next round. Bye.
Bye.